So we're finally at the point where I can talk a little bit about the first murder. And this was really important to me because it got to show the core of what Trent Chesterfield is really all about. And so, I put it under a spoiler tag. And what that means is that it's all underneath a tag that you need to press in order to read it. And that's because we're talking about over 1,700 words roughly, which is actually pretty small compared to the other ones. This was my first attempt at doing this, and you don't need to read it in order to progress with the story. The story is about living with a person who behaves and is this way, and it's not about being a serial killer. It's about living with one. So I started it off with a content warning because you know me, I love my content warnings. This content warning, let me go ahead and read that one to you and you'll see what I mean. It's basically, this story revolves around a serial killer, amoral, bloody, exploitative, manipulative, murdering, self-destructive serial killer. It tells a story that is meant to be monstrous. Please do not mistake this for myself being monstrous or confuse his personality for mine. I am not the character. Reader discretion is advised. And I do these content warnings pretty periodically to kind of give people a heads up about what they're about to read, what they're dealing with. And of course, I'm constantly trying to remind people that this is fiction, right? It's not real. So some of my later content warnings get a little more descriptive, and that's because I don't want them to use this story as a guide for other actions or for other behaviors or anything like that. And content warnings are a good way to save on making that kind of assumption. The first thing I did was start off with some music. That music was designed to get your mind in the right frame rather than to be read with the music. I just kind of wanted to give something to get you in the right state of being, the right frame of mind when you're reading this. A lot of research went into this. Books and movies and other stuff, they tend to write or tell a story, but they don't usually give it through the perpetrator's behavior. So when you're dealing with homicide, which is never a fun subject to begin with, you're usually dealing with the aftermath, not the actual action. And so to complicate that even further, we're dealing with a serial killer instead of rage-fueled or emotionally induced action. So this took a lot of research and a lot of time to come up with how I would go about doing this. I spoke with several people. This was the first time Dexter was recommended to me. I did read quite a bit, and I also watched some, I think it was about 6 or 7 episodes of Dexter. And there's some pretty significant differences between Trent and Dexter, and one of those being that Dexter's very methodical. He's very thought out. He's very well informed. He's very detailed. Trent's not. He's more emotional. He's more reckless. He makes more mistakes. He doesn't have a police background. He doesn't have the intelligence. He has the intelligence, but he doesn't have the know-how in order to avoid making mistakes. And mistakes need to be made because the story's not going to last forever. Things are going to happen that's eventually going to bring this story to a close. So I needed to kind of use what I knew and use what I learned to splice it all together and come up with something that was both realistic but also enjoyable, and that's not an easy thing to do. His victims, I needed to show some kind of pattern for his victims. Is he picking these people at random? Is there some kind of mythology to how he's picking them? What's happening with with how he picks these people. And a lot of that falls back on his background, and what kind of person are they. He stalks them. He does more information, more research. He tries to figure out who he's dealing with, and if they meet the criteria, then he moves on to the next stage. Then it came down to, is he capturing them? Is he, how's he doing this? And to make that more clear, the answer would be no. Capturing people just seemed too difficult to really work out correctly without getting caught. So he's not capturing people. And then with the weapon and the trophies, the weapon was another idea. The co-author helped me quite a bit, and so did Raquel. They both helped me quite a bit come up with some ideas on the trophies and the weapon. And so, not wanting to be able to take a trophy, it just didn't seem right for him to take something from a body that he no longer considered useful. His whole demeanor is watching the soul leave the body. He's not killing them for the sake of killing them, and he's not doing it for the action. He's doing it for the aftermath. When they're gone, and that moment before the soul leaves the body, that's what his whole rush is about. And then, as for the trophy, it came down to, let's do something where he takes the weapon and keeps that, but I would still want some of the gore and stuff to be on the weapon, which came with its own set of problems. If you've got a weapon with gore on it, not only do you have evidence, but you also have a stinky mess that you have to deal with. So in this regard, we kind of came up with vacuum sealed kind of bags that could hold the weapon and keep it in pristine condition. And he would just change his weapon after every scene, after every murder. So that's kind of how that all went down, trying to figure out how much, how realistic is this? I mean, if you did this to somebody, would they die right away? What would happen to the body? All very disturbing stuff to research, and that's exactly what I did. I did a lot of research on it, and I tried to figure out what was happening and how to make this as realistic as possible. And it's a lot of it you have to come up with. I just wasn't able to find the information that I needed to, so I had to make it up. And hopefully I did a good job with it. Hopefully it comes off correctly. The next big part of this was the root cellar, which is where his trophy room is. And I will talk a little bit more about the trophy room here, but if we find that there's just too much, then I'll stop this and I'll come up with more information in a different one. The trophy room led to his back room root cellar, his back root cellar out in the backyard, which opens up into a huge winery room, a huge wine room with tables and so forth, and you have to go all the way to the back. This is where he spent all his money for the house, all his millions and so forth. This is where he really put the money forward. You go to the back of this root cellar, and there's a wine bottle that you need to pull, and it'll unlatch one of the shelves. That shelf will pull out just a little bit, and then you have to crawl behind there, which goes into another room, very small, with all these trophy cases in there, where he keeps his murder weapon and a photo of what he believes is the soul leaving the body. And there's a very small light in there, and that's kind of where he keeps all his trophies. And he's got this door sealed up so tight that if somebody managed to break in there, that's not enough, right? They still have to go all the way to the second to the last shelf. They still have to find the appropriate wine bottle. They have to pull it, and then even when they do, the shelf isn't going to open all the way. It's only going to open a little bit, and then you have to crawl back in behind there. So this was a huge deal for me, and I went into you know, the size of the trophy cases, the type of camera that he's using, all of it. You know, I really went into a lot of detail about this because this was an important part in his story, and I wanted to make sure to add as much information as possible. So once all this was done and the whole scene had played out, then we kind of got back into the finale, you could say, of the erotica that had started prior, which we talked a little bit about before. Well, that kind of comes to a conclusion. You know, he goes into his home, he's feeling more relaxed, he's feeling more calm, all that stress and all that buildup, all those compulsions that he had to deal with, they're all fading away like a drug. And while he's riding this high, that erotica scene has a chance to take place, and they kind of finish, and he finally makes it to home base. So that's kind of how this whole thing worked out, and it played out really well. I think it read really well for a story. It's definitely a story that I would have been interested in reading, and I think it all played out really well. I'll see you in the next one. I think we're coming to a close now. There's not a whole lot left to talk about, but we'll see.